Hi guys, and welcome to Vlogmas Day 14. Today I'm going to be bringing you a discussion video. I don't do these too often, but this one has been weighing this on my mind for quite a while, and I decided to just Vlogmas was the time to do it. So yes, we're actually only 10 more videos left in Vlogmas, which makes me kind of sad. I've really enjoyed posting daily videos, even when the struggle is real, like yesterday, when I literally just had 10 minutes to film while there was still light out, and I kind of had to do it really quickly, and you know, I'm sure I made mistakes in that video, but I had to film a video, and I had family over, and I had to deal with that. So that's kind of been fun. So today's discussion, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how social media and booktube have influenced my reading personally. I'm drawing from my own personal experiences, so not everything is going to apply to everyone, because you know, we're all special little snowflakes and one size does not fit all. But these are some things that I've noticed that have changed for me since joining booktube and joining Goodreads and setting Goodreads challenges, that have influenced my reading since before reading became so sociable, if that makes sense. Because certainly for me, in the past few years, reading has become a much more social thing. Before joining booktube and joining Goodreads, I tended to read kind of in a vacuum. I read what I wanted, I read what professors recommended, or teachers, and I tended not to discuss books as much, which is a shame. One of the reasons that I joined booktube was so I could talk about what I was reading with other people, because it's really hard in your life to find people who are reading the exact same things that you are, especially if you tend to just read classics. It's a little harder to find people who just read classics in real life, other than, you know, when you're outside of the university setting. So yeah, there's definitely been some changes. One of the first ones that I'm going to talk about is, I have like a whole little list on my phone, is Goodreads challenges and pressure to be constantly reading. So I like Goodreads challenges, but from 2014 to 2015, I did a little bit of a change. In 2014, I think I set like 75 books to read for myself that year, and I read something like insane, like 160 or something like that. And a lot of what I read, and there's nothing wrong with reading this, but I read a lot of YA. And I read a lot of YA to hit my challenge target and to surpass my challenge target. I find YA personally to be relatively easy, quick reads. They're not challenging in any real way that stops me from reading them very quickly. They're like candies. You digest them really quickly. For me, this may not apply to all people. Some people really like YA, some people find it challenging. I've more or less given up on the genre, having just kind of become a little fed up with the tropes that tend to be prevalent in that genre. So this year I set my challenge to 50 books, and I have read predominantly classics, which I think I'm pretty happy with my performance this year, although I am gonna tweak it again for next year. I have read quite a few novellas and short stories, which still count, in my opinion. I've also read a lot more graphic novels this year. I've gotten much more into comics, which I've also counted towards my goal, as long as they're like trade paperback bind-ups. I don't include single issues of comics, but I do include trades, which I think I'm not going to do next year. I don't think I'm gonna track my trade paperback reading next year. Next year I think I'm gonna set my goal much lower, and I think I'm only gonna set it at like 20 books. Now, I know I'm going to surpass this goal the same way I knew I was gonna surpass 50 books. I think I'm sitting currently at like 90 books read this year. It's more that I don't want to put undue pressure on myself to read things. And I find when I have a goal set that I read shorter works. So for example, novellas, or I will pass over that, 600-page beast of a novel and choose instead the 200-page novel, because that will count towards my goal and I'll be able to get through that in less than a week, so that way I'm progressing towards my goal. So next year I kind of want to take a bit of a step back and focus more on enjoying what I'm reading, not slowing down. I don't think that I need to read any slower, but being less afraid to pick up that larger book because, you know, oh, if I read this book and it takes me 2 or 3 weeks to read it, that's going to set me behind on my goal, is kind of been my like thought process for the past couple of years. Now I have read some longer books in the past couple of years. I've read Moby Dick, I've read Middlemarch, I've read Great Expectations, I've read The Mill and the Floss, so I have read longer works, but I felt that pressure to push through that book and to finish that book within a certain period of time, so that way I could move on to the next thing and keep ticking the boxes on my Goodreads challenge. So that's something that I think I'm going to be changing in the future, because I kind of, reading is for me something I do for pleasure. And I mean, I do it to better myself, certainly, but I also do it for my own personal enjoyment. So I think I'm going to be slowing down a little bit. You know, I've seen some videos recently with people talking about, you know, I want to read quality over quantity, and that's totally a great perspective. That's not what I'm doing here though. It's more, I just want to put less pressure on myself, because when I set a challenge, because of the type of person that I am, I'm very much type A, I'm very, very diligent in that kind of thing. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and it's to be fair, it's my own fault for putting pressure. I feel like there's somebody kind of standing over me, watching what I'm doing when I have a challenge. And if I fail to meet that challenge, the world will end, even though it won't actually. It's not that big of a deal if you don't meet your challenge. So I'm gonna set my challenge much lower next year and kind of just focus on, you know, reading at a steady pace, but choosing my books with a little less thought towards the challenge. So the other thing I want to talk about is books that kind of, you know, make the rounds on BookTube and give this kind of false sense of lack of originality in BookTubers. I have a lot of issues with this. There's a bookmark that I got from, I think it's Wordery, and it's a Haruki Murakami quote, and it's from Norwegian Wood, and it's something along the lines of, if you read what everybody else's read, how can you have an original thought in your head? And I take a lot of issue with that quote, mostly because everybody brings their own personal experiences and their own personal interpretations for a book, so no two people read the same book the exact same way. You're always going to have differences of opinion. So there is always going to be an original, fresh perspective every time somebody steps up to a book. Even when you read it a second time, your opinions may change. I know, for example, when this year I had to reread The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is one of my personal favorite books, for a class, I ended up walking away not really enjoying it. And that was really hard for me, because that was a big part of who I was growing up. But I read it with a much more critical eye, and I read it with, you know, there's parts where Santa goes to the Pevensey children, to Lucy and Susan, and goes, oh, well, women shouldn't fight, so I'm not giving you weapons. That really bothered me this time around. That didn't so much when I was a child, and I didn't pick up on those things. So even when you're rereading against yourself, you're always going to have different interpretations. One example of this, and I just got this in the post, so I thought I would share this, is I have this book, Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Marble Fawn, which I picked up because Jean posted it in a haul video. And Jean posted it in a haul video and picked it up because Sana from Books and Quills recommended it to her. So it's kind of this like 6 degrees of separation where you're getting book recommendations from people, and so you're all kind of reading the same thing. And so you kind of get this weird perception that people are reading the same thing and we only read the same thing, but that's not always the case. And I mean, we all have different interpretations of things. It's the same with when people do buddy reads. Everybody's reading the same books at the same time, but it's great because it facilitates a kind of discussion when you're doing buddy reads and kind of a ongoing conversation about a book that you wouldn't necessarily have. Sometimes when I read books not in buddy reads, it tends to be more of a one-sided discussion. Like I talk about it with you guys, I talk about it on camera, I review pretty much every single thing that I read because I've switched to doing monthly reviews of everything that I've read in that month. But I prefer buddy reads because it gives me kind of that classroom discussion. So that's one of the good things about BookTube, is that I've been able to find people to do buddy reads with, and who have similar tastes, and that I can talk about stuff with and bounce ideas off of and be like, I'm not sure about this part, what did you think? And kind of get different perspectives, which is really great. The downside of buddy reads is that they don't always work out, as was the case with, most recently, my attempt to buddy read The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James with some people, and we all just ended up walking away. We're like, no, we can't do this. This is awful. We can't do this. Which was also kind of funny in its own way, but sometimes buddy reads don't work out. Sometimes your schedules don't line up. Claire from Reading Bukowski and I have been trying to do a buddy read of Orlando for ages now, and every time we're like, yeah, we're gonna do it this month, and then we're kind of like, oh yeah, we're both really busy, or we just completely forget about it. So buddy reads don't always work out, but when they do, they are fantastic. Another thing I want to talk about is, you know, when you're reading a really popular book that everybody has talked about. For example, I know some people that I know don't like Jane Austen. I don't understand why they don't like Jane Austen, but they feel this pressure not to bash Jane Austen because she's so fairly universally loved. And that's really unfortunate, because there is kind of that perception of you don't want to bash the thing that's popular, or you kind of, you know, modify your review a little bit to fit that. I don't really run into that so much, mostly because I do read a lot of classics, although classics are popular, but because I tend to read a lot of classics, it's not so much that I'm, you know, it's the hot new book that everybody's reading. That's never really what I come across. So yeah, that's not something I experience too much, but every so often I'll read something that's more contemporary and run into that issue. Yeah, and there's just, in general, as I've been talking about in this video, it's kind of this balance of, on one hand, with BookTube, you have this really, really great sense of community. And on the other hand, there's this constant pressure of being watched and being judged and constantly feeling like you need to read new things. And you put that pressure on yourself. I mean, it's not nobody's actually standing over your shoulder and going, oh, you only read one book this month, you're a failure as a booktuber. It's yourself. You're totally putting that pressure on yourself that, you know, you're feeling like, oh my god, I haven't read enough, I have nothing to talk about, how am I gonna make videos for the next month if I haven't read anything? And these are all thoughts that I've had while doing BookTube, but it's not something that, you know, is super negative. It's myself. It's part of why I want to step back from doing Goodreads challenges a bit. I don't want to give up Goodreads challenges, because I do like that I can see how many books I've read in a year, and that way I can kind of peruse through, and it helps me pick out my top books for at the end of the year. But I do want to kind of, you know, put a lot less pressure on myself. Yeah, I think I think I've touched on everything I wanted to talk about. Let me consult my list really quickly. Yeah, that's everything I really wanted to talk about. If you guys have any thoughts of these, if you guys have noticed that since joining Goodreads or since watching BookTube, if you've noted a change in your reading habits, let me know in the comments down below, and let's get a discussion started. And I will see you guys tomorrow for Vlogmas Day 15. Bye!